How's it going?
Good, mate. Yourself?
Pretty good.
Where's Kibble?
Oh, shit.
Oh,
Where
he's not
is
coming.
Kibble?
He's not coming, is he?
Oh, well,
Science?
yes.
Science!
So I take it from the 2 drams there, we're talking about colouring.
I think we should.
We go on and on about it quite a bit.
We talk about it on all our episodes, whether it is coloured or non-coloured. So what do we actually mean when we talk about the colouring?
Wow.
Because we don't even have a description and talk about the actual colour of the whiskey in our episodes.
Because if you compare it to that, god damn, that's a difference in colour.
Yeah. What we actually are talking about is whether a whiskey is coloured with caramel colouring or not. Some are, some aren't.
Like, actual caramel? Like Werther's original caramel?
Kind of. Not candy caramel, but caramel colouring.
Alright.
So the caramel colouring has been around for a long time. It's one of the oldest additives that have been added to food and beverages since...
19th century?
Well, beer was the first one to come out and actually, in the industry, say that they have been adding and using caramel colouring. So it's been used a little bit before then, but the early 19th century is when they started saying, okay,
Documenting it.
yeah, the beer industry is mass producing it and using it for beer.
Well, because if you think about how long whiskey's been around for, it's definitely been used before then, I reckon.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, because if you look at the old days, people wouldn't really care that much.
Yeah.
Because if you go back to the shops and everything where they were actually putting whiskey in the barrel and selling it to the customer, they didn't care what colour it was. They were just taking their container in and getting filled up with whiskey and going home and getting on the a few drams.
On the sauce.
Yeah. So I don't think they really... I think it's a modern thing. And the main reason is for consistency.
Yeah. So batch consistency and... So you
Because
don't-
I expect, you know, someone who doesn't really know much about whiskey walks into your shop and goes, I had such and such a whiskey, and they look at it the next time to buy a bottle and it's a completely different colour. They're going to go,
This is a different whiskey.
well, it's the same label, they're the same price, but what's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does help with that sort of aspect in the retail side.
Yeah. So,
But most whiskey nuts aren't a big fan of it.
no. Pure whiskey has no colouring. It actually is completely clear. So this is some Bladnoch new make. There is no colour to that whatsoever.
So new make is before they barrel it, before they add colouring and everything. It is just as it's distilled before the maturation
straight
process.
out of the still.
Okay.
And then they'll stick it into the cask and mature it. So after the new make, they stick it in a barrel, and both of these whiskies have no colouring added, so they are out of the barrel. So all the influence that's come out of the colouring for these is purely from the cask.
So that could be from a variety of different reasons. So like the age, the time it's spent in the cask.
Longer is going to be better. Yep.
Even temperatures when they're maturing it, because it'll allow it to go in and out of the wood more.
Totally.
The style of barrel, obviously sherry cask and port cask are going to have a much darker finish than just an American oak cask.
Yep. And if it's a new cask, so
Yeah.
if it's going to be virgin oak, American oak compared to European casks, whether it's been charred, yep, so you'll get more dark stuff if it's been charred. All these different factors.
So how is caramel made?
Well, they grab some carbohydrates, sugars, and they cook the living hell out of it, add some acidic, alkaline, salty type stuff, and voila, you've got this black syrupy goop that they add into the whiskey.
And it's not necessarily always black, is it? I believe it ranges in like 6 or 7 different colours it comes in.
Depending on the type, because
Yeah.
there's actually 4 different types of caramel colouring. And yeah, so they can range all the way from really light colours like this, all the way to almost brown, dark red. Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty much just cooked sugar.
Yeah. So the 4 different types, can they all be used in whiskey, or...?
depending where you live in the world.
Okay.
And what kind of caramel colouring you're adding. So all caramel colouring is classified as E150.
Yep.
So if you look on anything that you have in your pantry that's food product or any beverages, more than likely it's got E150 colouring in it. And depending on the 4 different types, because you've got A, B, C and D. So each one of those has a better application for different things. For example, E150D is used more for Coca-Cola and other beverages, because 3/4 of colouring in the world produced goes into cola products. 4 different varieties of caramel colouring have different properties. So like I said with the D, that's really good for acidic
So it's
type.
acid proof.
Yeah, it's acid proof. And then you go into the next one, which is the C. That's more for salty stuff. So you use that in like beer, for example. They use it in beer, gravy, soy sauce, barbecue sauce. Yeah, all those kind of things.
Licorice, which is an odd one.
Yeah, licorice, which I thought was strange because, yeah, that's odd. And then the next 2 are where they use predominantly in alcohols. Now, the B is used in pretty much every alcohol you can name under the sun.
And tea.
And tea. So, your rum, whiskies, certain whiskies, brandy, cognac, sherry, and a bunch of... And most of all these are used in different food products as well, but we're talking about liquids. Because under the Scotch Whisky Association guidelines, regulations, you will do this, this, and this. They stipulate that the only 2 things you're allowed to add to any whiskey after it's come out of the still is water and colouring. And it has to be E150A colouring. Can't be used any one of the other 3.
But in the rest of Europe, you can use A and B, or which are really any one that you want.
And in Scotland, there is no rules and regulations whether you have to stipulate it like you do on a normal product you buy in the shop, like your cookies, for example. They stipulate what preservatives and stuff are added. Whiskey does not have to do that. Scotch whisky does not have to do that.
Unless
You live in Germany.
Yeah, or Denmark.
Or Denmark.
Yeah.
So in Germany and in Denmark, they have to stipulate that there's got colouring in it if it's been added, whereas everywhere else in the world they don't have to. And I think it's a real shame that we don't have that rule with our liquors.
In my opinion, it's not more or less if it's got the colouring in it. It won't stop me from buying a bottle of whiskey, but I'd like to know if it was there.
Exactly.
Because particularly when doing research for this episode, trying to find out which whiskies we had which had colouring and stuff is near on impossible because you can't find it.
It's a complete nightmare trying to find out. And on some German websites, they do stipulate it, but even there, it's kind of ambiguous because they might be saying it for the German market or international. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the producers don't stipulate that they have colouring or whether they don't have colouring. Some distillers now are starting to put in whether they are putting colouring in, which is good. So Johnny Walker Red Label, for example, it's got colouring.
Yeah.
And this one, which is this one here, does not have colouring. And you can tell that it's actually quite lighter. So all of the colour is coming out of the casks. It's got nothing to do with adding caramel, which I think is a lot more interesting when you're looking at your whiskey.
Yeah.
If I look, that's why we never review the colour, because we don't know. Unless it's stipulated that isn't, there's no point in reviewing the colour of a whiskey. Because if we brought this out and go, yeah, it's this nice dark honey looking hue, and it's completely pointless. This one, for example, has some really good information on the back here. It says, mit Farbstoff and Farben Justeret med Karamell, which I completely butchered the Danish pronunciation of that. But mit Farbstoff means with colouring, and the Danish means colour altered with caramel. Other distillers, where they don't have to put it on, in Scotland, it says non-chill filtered natural colour. So Macallan, which is this one here, does not state anywhere on the label that it does not have colouring, but we did a little bit of research and
We're confident that it doesn't have it. Yeah.
doesn't have it.
We found on a couple of websites it is listed as non-chill filtered and non-coloured, but you can't also guarantee on that without it coming from the distiller itself.
In the future, we're going to buy some E150A colouring, and we're going to do some experiments with it to see whether, because there's a big division between people that say, no, it doesn't make any difference to the whiskey, the taste. And yes, it does. So, who knows? Personally, I think should not be altered.
I'd prefer it without it, but it doesn't faze me.
No, like, I certainly drink it, but I'd prefer not to have alterations added. Because, yeah, I want it how the distiller meant it to be, not what the mass consumers want. Yeah. I mean, it's fair enough. Like this, it's got colouring, I don't care. But if I'm buying something that's, you know, a little bit more interesting and unique, there's no reason for it to have colouring. And I don't care if from one batch to next bottle or whatever, it's a little bit different in the colour. That means it's unique. It's actually really hard to actually have consistency without adding colour. Because if your aim is to have every single bottle to look the same from batch to batch, it's going to be really difficult because every batch process is going to be a little bit different. With the grain, the yeast, the maturation, the heat, all that. And then when you go to maturation, every cask is going to be different.
Yes.
So to have a consistency is not going to be easy. So I can understand why they do it, but yeah, I wish they didn't.
Yeah.
So you got anything to talk about when it comes to colouring of our beloved whiskey?
No, I reckon that's covered it pretty well.
I think so too. And we're going to have to talk about the other side.
The chill filtering.
Yeah. So in our next video, we're going to talk about chill filtration.
Yeah. I reckon it'll be fun once we get our hands on a little bit of the E150. And
do some
we can
experiments.
play around with it. Yeah.
Yeah, because supposedly pure E150 is meant to be really bitter and strong. And yeah, so that doesn't sound good. So, on that note, grab a dram.
Yeah, I got the good one.
They're both good. And until next time, have a good one.
God, this bottle hasn't been touched in a while.
No, this is an old dusty, this one.
Too right.
Off with it.